Hi, everyone. I am incredibly excited and honored to introduce our second student speaker of the night, Sydney Hyder. Sydney is one of the most charismatic, funny, and kind-hearted people I know, and is a dear friend. I think I speak for many of my second-year classmates when I say that our class just wouldn't feel quite complete without her. Her personality is infectious, and she has this amazing ability to bring a smile to your face at any moment. And anyone who's been through the plains during the day knows that that's where you're most likely to find her, studying in her cubicle in the back with Beyoncé or the Lord of the Rings soundtrack blasting through her headphones. To most of us, that is the quintessential Sydney. But it is her passion for medicine and people that stands out most of all. How passionate is she? Well, let's just say her original med talk clocked in at just around 30 minutes. That's twice the 15-minute time frame. She just wouldn't stop talking, nor did we want her to. Her talk may be shorter now, but its inspiring message and charm is still as powerful as ever. So please join me in welcoming our next speaker, Sydney Hyder.
A little known fact about me is that I love driving. Not just driving to the mall, but I'm talking truck driver, 12-hour, no end in sight driving. I discovered this trait of mine this summer before my first year of medical school when I spent a month driving around the country. The trip started with the plans of hiking and sightseeing with the occasional selfie. But halfway through my trip, two things struck out to me: the extreme poverty present and the sheer expansiveness of this country. Growing up in a suburb, I was surrounded at all times by strip malls, and my only perception of poverty was Camden. It wasn't until I hit the state of Idaho, when there was at least an hour's driving distance between homes, did it hit me. Where the heck do these people see doctors? When I got home, I couldn't let go of these questions. Like, what happens if you have a heart attack? And do they even get phone service out there? And why isn't anyone else asking these questions? So, during my first year of medical school, before I knew 1 ounce of anything medically related, I decided I wanted to spend that summer in a rural area finding my answers. After a lengthy process, I found a program, so I packed up my bag, put on my imaginary trucker hat, and set off for Livingston, Tennessee, a town of 1,200 people, to shadow and learn about rural medicine. Here's some background. Only 10% of America's physicians work in a rural area, even though a quarter of the population lives there. Here's another one. Only half the number of specialists per 100,000 people work in the rural area compared to the urban counterpart. But these are just numbers, piled on more numbers that lose meaning without context. What does rural medicine look like in that microcosm, in that small town we're all picturing? Well, welcome to Livingston, Tennessee. I had no idea what to expect from my physician preceptor, or for Tennessee for that matter. What was little old northern me gonna be doing in Appalachia for a month? Yes, Appalachia, as my southern friends say. Let me paint you a picture of the town. There was one main road, just covered in fast food chains, and like one working streetlight. You turn off that road and you're just lost in fields and acres of farmland. I lived above an abandoned cardiologist clinic, and I call it abandoned because there would only be physicians in it when they decided to come in from Nashville. When I got to the Rickman Clinic for my first day, I came face to face with the character that is Dr. Nelson. Dr. Nelson knew at a young age that he wanted to help his community. So, after medical school, he moved home and opened up a family practice. Initially, he couldn't decide between veterinary and human medicine. He obviously chose human, but that didn't stop him from being the town's backup vet. As he says, delivering a goat is a whole lot like delivering a human. When he wasn't at the clinic, you could find him at the rodeo on his horse named Spider-Man, and to top off his character, he wore a cowboy hat and cowboy boots with his scrubs. His clinic was small, But that didn't stop him. He did the yearly physicals, drug refills, mole removals, monthly allergy shots, vaginal births, C-sections, tummy tucks, breast augmentation. As you can tell, this guy did a lot. And what's great is that he loved doing it all. If you're looking for a country doc, you found it. But for a man who physically does so much, he constantly has to overcome obstacles. After shadowing him for a month, I learned how hard it was for a country doc to exist and actually practice medicine. It was another day in Livingston when a man came in complaining of chest pain. All right, let me practice my presentation skills. Okay, we have a 55-year-old obese man with a past medical history significant for multiple heart attacks, presenting with sudden substernal chest pain radiating to the left arm. All right, team, what are we thinking? All right, so we got a little bit more history and we ran an EKG. All right, so the pain's not as bad as his last heart attack. And he had this pain after he had a huge Mexican lunch. And the EKG is not showing anything kind of funny. So what would we do here at Robert Wood? Keep him overnight, run a couple tests, maybe do a PCI if it ended up being more serious? But let me throw in a twist. If this man was truly having a heart attack, we would have had to ship him 45 minutes away to another hospital. Why the trip for such a common problem? The hospital where the patient presented didn't have a cath lab. This made our decision very important. Do we send an underinsured man 45 minutes away, causing him to pay an ambulance and hospital bills if he wasn't truly having a heart attack? And would he even get to that hospital in time for the proper medical intervention? Or do we just send him home and hope that we made the right call with an EKG alone? That same hospital was also the same one I learned that couldn't medically manage a child that presented with meningitis. So think about it. If you went to the doctors because you were sick and they weren't able to treat you, are you likely to go back? Making that initial diagnosis in the rural setting takes on a whole new meaning. Sending your patient to the wrong place or to the wrong doctor could waste some time, money, and trust in the medical community. So why didn't that hospital have a cath lab to begin with? Country hospitals provide the highest quality of care while balancing kind of like a fun combination of remote geographic location, constrained financial resources, lack of manpower, and a small patient population. And without all the supplies to treat you, simple decisions really become life or death. Yet we expect our physicians to go in there and do all they can to do no harm and heal, without all the tools to do their job. All right, Sydney, well, if you want me to move out there, I'm gonna need to know what I'm dealing with. Well, I can let you know that you'll be dealing with both the most patient and also thankful population I've ever run into. After we treated a family, they came in with 10 huge watermelons from their own farm as a thank you gift. But they're also a population that's been severely medically misguided. What do I mean by that? Well, let me introduce you to a family I met. I was shadowing in the ER when a family came in complaining that their toddler has injuries that just won't get better. Looking at the kid, he seems well fed, no obvious marks or bruises on his body, but a little bit uncomfortable. The doc sends him to get some x-rays and to better understand these injuries, and we continue seeing patients. A little while longer, the nurse kind of flags us down, and the doc is like, "I'm busy." The nurse goes, "Yeah, it's the radiologist, and he needs to see you right now." We run over to the radiologist, since there was only one for the entire hospital, and we walk into that dark room, and he's just standing there, eyes wide, mouth open. We try to get it out of him. What is it? And he just looks at me and he says, "Medical student, take note of this. You will never forget this, and you will never see it again." I lean around trying to get a glance at the screen, and what do I see? A widened growth plate of the knees and bowed legs. This kid had rickets. You know those conditions that you learn about in medical school that you're almost positive you're never gonna actually see? Like, I was convinced this was gonna be my one shot of seeing Rocky Mountain spotted fever. I didn't get that, but I got the zebra case of rickets. Rickets is a rare childhood disorder with an incidence in the US of only 9 per 1 million children. When we went back to go talk to the family about their child's diet and calcium intake, we found out that they didn't know their child needed milk, but gave them water and only water. Oh my God, as you can imagine, I had like so many questions. Like, where the heck is this kid's pediatrician? You know, I actually never got any of those questions answered, but it really made me rethink health education and health literacy in this country. The reason why rural America has such low levels of health literacy would probably take like an anthropology class and like a whole other med talk. But what it means is that they're a population that puts off seeing a doctor seeking medical care, giving them high levels of chronic problems like hypertension, diabetes, and a kid with rickets. And it's true, working in rural America, you'll be dealing with a unique patient population. But this in no way means that they're undereducated or rednecks, because they're not. It just means that they require specific care, a care that they're not getting, and if they are, they're not getting it properly. It's time we change this. We can't let another kid slip through the cracks. And you know what? Speaking of rednecks, let's just throw out all those stereotypes of hillbillies and let's stop trying to otherize them. I have so many stories that I would love to say, hashtag only in Appalachia. But I'll be honest, they have some stories about the North. The more that we continue to think that they're this wacky subset of American population, the more that we'll continue to distance ourselves and believe that we don't belong in their territory. In order to promise them equal access to healthcare, we need to respect them and their culture. So, it's time we welcome rural America into our own health education. When we're in PCM and we have to think of alternative meds, how many of our minds just jump to foreign concoctions? What if you had a patient come in and say, yeah, I think I have pink eye, so I put potato water in it. Or I have this abscess, and my grandmother said putting vinegar on it would make it so much better. Some of these things would sound downright crazy if you hadn't heard them before. And how many of us between our first and second year thought about going abroad, studying international medicine, rather than learning about the underserved community right here in our backyard? All right, Sydney, well, what do you want me to do about it? Well, let me be the first to congratulate you that you've already taken the first steps into bettering rural America. You've listened. Hopefully through these stories, rural America is a little less big, a little less rural, and a lot more real. You may not be able to deliver a goat, but just because you're not a cowboy doesn't mean you can't make the country your home. So I was trying to figure out, why don't we have rural physicians? And I did my research, and I want to emphasize this last point in red. So what this is saying is that if I didn't go on that trip across the country and if I didn't spend that month in Tennessee, would I have even known that there was a problem in the first place? Maybe we don't have rural physicians because we don't even know that it's an option. Medical schools nationwide need to realize that this problem isn't going away. And just because you may not declare yourself as a rural medical school doesn't mean this problem's not our own. It's time to make these rural outlets obvious and accessible to anyone who has a glimmer of interest. I think a lot of us probably believe that rural medicine is like this dead-end assignment. Like you're gonna move out to God knows where in North Dakota, and that's it. But there's so much room to innovate as a caregiver that isn't bogged down by a huge hospital corporate network or a giant staff. You take on real responsibility. You become these people's lifelines. You're expected to do more with less, and you get accepted into their families. We had little kids coming in asking Dr. Nelson when the next time they could ride his horse Spider-Man at the rodeo was. You can move out to the country, try new things, and innovate. It's like having a stripped-down little microcosm where you could find the gaps in healthcare and doctoring and translate that up to help other communities. It's not a dead-end assignment. The next step is to destigmatize rural physicians. I think a lot of us, especially me, would probably think that rural physicians were less competent. Because if you were competent, you'd be working in a large urban hospital, right? But what I found is that rural physicians are the Dr. Nelsons, the multitaskers, the people that work for the community rather than recognition and get excited by finding ways to be creative with medicine. One of the doctors I met, he found out that there wasn't any safe place to walk in his community. So through one of the many grants that he wrote, he got funding and built a track around his own clinic and started a walking club. We also need to stop believing that rural America is just for primary care physicians. Specialists, please hear my plea. They need you. No one should have to wait 8 weeks to see an endocrinologist or drive 2 hours every week into Nashville to see a pulmonologist. For a place that has such high levels of chronic problems, how can we ever hope to treat them if we don't even have the proper medical team? So now you know that rural America needs you, and it's up to you to figure out where you fit into that picture. It probably seems impossible to picture yourself out there until you've experienced it. It wasn't even until I spent that month in Tennessee did I even feel passionate enough to give this talk. If you're a first year, consider doing a similar program. Get your feet wet in rural medicine and see if you like it. For the second and third years, consider doing an away rotation at a rural hospital. Find the gaps in healthcare and get excited by the opportunity to fill them. For all of us students, look into the National Health Service Corps, where the government actually pays you to pay your dues to the rural community. For the physicians, you may not be able to relocate your family now, but consider going down to Tennessee once in a while as a locum tenens physician. You could be that specialist or a surgeon in a hospital that's chronically lacking you. Or think about telemedicine, where you can give health consults and advice from the comfort of your office here in New Jersey. And for all of us, the next time we're debating healthcare policy, let's do it on the national level rather than these close-by communities. If any of this gets you excited or spikes your interest, start your own research. Find your voice and don't be afraid to use it. This country is beautiful, and it holds so much that we don't even know because we refuse to open our minds to it. I need to believe, as a future physician, I can use my enthusiasm and my knowledge to mold change. It doesn't need to be global change. I'm probably not going to find the cure for cancer, and I won't be the next Paul Farmer, even though I'd love it. But I can be that change that a small rural community needs. I can use my hands, my brain, my spirit to provide a voice to my rural friends and give them the medical care that they're asking for. It's time we take a step back out of our urban lifestyle and give time to remember their forgotten country doc. Thank you.